A preliminary hearing for state agent Mark Wagner is postponed. He's accused of reckless endangerment for shooting Quadren Wilson back in February. Wagner's attorneys filed a motion to recuse the prosecution from the case. NBC 15's Marcus Arsvold joining us live in the newsroom. And Marcus, this recusal claims prosecutors could have a conflict of interest due to other investigations involving Wilson.
The Dane County District Attorney's Office is prosecuting Wagner. According to the motion filed by Wagner's attorneys, Wagner's lawyers say the DA's office could be called as material witnesses, which they believe is a conflict of interest. The motion says the DA's staff has, quote, been intimately involved in these events leading up to Wilson's arrest. Wagner's attorneys then list several previous encounters they believe happened between Wilson and law enforcement. I spoke with UW law experts about the validity of these claims. Professor John Gross says he's not convinced the motion is grounds for recusal. He says the DA's assistants were not at the scene of these alleged crimes, therefore could not be called as witnesses.
It's not necessary to call them. In fact, they are not the relevant witness because everything that they would testify to is hearsay. They heard it from someone else. The witnesses that are the relevant witnesses are the other members of law enforcement who had some personal knowledge about Mr. Wilson's activities.
Gross says next the judge will decide whether or not the recusal request warrants a hearing, or the judge could simply deny the request. Live in the newsroom, Marcus Arsvold, NBC 15 News.